You ever hear a Jamaican say, "Me soon come," and it take them a whole day? Or, "Oh, hush," in our culture no mean shut up, but instead, "Me sorry for you." Today we start a brand new series on Jamaican identity and culture. And we'll begin right where it did all start, for real. Patwa. The language or dialect, depending on who you ask, that carry our story from plantation to platform, from shame to stage. This is many notable things, and today we turn with ears to the sound of survival. Jamaican Patois or Jamaican Creole emerged during slavery in the 17th and 18th centuries out of necessity. Enslaved Africans, brought primarily from West and Central Africa, found themselves in brutal plantation systems controlled by English-speaking Europeans. In order to communicate among themselves and with their slave masters, a new system of speech had to develop. Several Caribbean linguists, including Professor of Sociolinguistics Mervyn Allen of Trinidad and Professor Hubert Devonish of Jamaica, have taught us that Patwa became that bridge, a hybrid tongue formed from English vocabulary, African syntax and rhythm, and elements of Spanish, Portuguese, and even indigenous Taino words. This blending of languages is what they call creolization, and it often occurs in colonial contexts where power and resistance clash in language. According to the late Jamaican poet and writer Velma Pollard, the Caribbean voice is shaped by rhythm and memory. What we say and how we say it carries our history. From colonial times straight into modern Jamaica, Patwa has been treated as inferior, a bad English spoken by the uneducated. This stigma isn't just about language, it's about class, race, and respectability politics. Standard Jamaican English was, and still is, the marker of education, status, and good upbringing. Speaking Patois, on the other hand, was often seen as crude, backward, or lazy. But ask yourself, why does the language of the oppressed so often get demonized? Here are some sociological concepts that come to mind. The concept of cultural capital introduced by Pierre Bourdieu. So the ability to code switch between Patois and standard Jamaican English is a skill, a kind of social currency that educated Jamaicans use to navigate different spaces. Uptown boardrooms, downtown cookshops, radio interviews, or even church. Symbolic power is another concept, and it's the idea that the power to define what language is quote unquote correct is itself a form of control. As the poet laureate of Patwa, Louise Bennett-Coverley, often expressed, "Me proud of me language and me no shame fi chat it pon stage." Louise Bennett-Coverley, or Miss Lou as Jamaicans affectionately call her, was instrumental in legitimizing Patwa. Through her poetry, performance, and personality, she made it respectable to speak Patwa publicly. Carolyn Cooper, a cultural critic and professor, has also used Patwa boldly, writing her Gleaner columns in both English and Patwa, forcing the nation to acknowledge its linguistic soul and, by extension, its beauty. Patwa has traveled far from village squares to global stages. Reggae and dancehall artists like Bob Marley, Chronix, and Coffee, as well as Buju Banton, Vibes Cartel, Sean Paul, and the queen of dancehall herself, Spice, use Patwa unapologetically, giving it global rhythm. In movies like The Harder They Come, Dancehall Queen, Third World Cup, and Shutters, Patwa gives voice to Jamaican identity. Of course, many of you may also have been introduced to Patwa in the film Cool Runnings, which was released in 1993. Shameless plug. Please feel free to listen to episode 3 of my Olympic Games series, where I discuss how this film essentially memorializes the debut of Jamaica's national bobsleigh team at the 1988 Winter Olympics in Calgary, Alberta. Linguists in the Jamaican Language Unit of the University of the West Indies Mona campus have done the work of documenting and promoting Patwa as a legitimate language with its own grammar, syntax, and expressive force. In November 2019, the Jamaican Language Unit launched a petition on the Prime Minister's website advocating for Patwa to be made an official language. The aim was to gather 15,000 signatures in order to make this a reality. However, the petition closed on December 14, 2019 with only 7,030 signatures, achieving just 46.87% of its goal. But the question remains, is Patwa a language or a dialect? Though a simple question, the answer is complex. This is because the difference is more political than it is structural. As linguist Emily Adams, author of Understanding Jamaican Patwa, An Introduction to Afro-Jamaican Grammar, once noted, a A language is a dialect with an army and a navy. In a very judgmental way, people I'm in the process of getting to know often ask me, why you always talk so proper? You're not Jamaican. And I always smile. I never answer. I also reduce contact after that. I cannot have you questioning my Jamaicanness. But since you're here, let me tell you. I grew up talking Patois, but I talked fast, real fast. People couldn't understand me and kept asking me to repeat myself. This sounds like a lame excuse, but it's true. When I went to private school between age 10 and 16, I had to learn to slow down, had to learn to code switch. On reflection, it's also a level of comfort thing for me. If I don't know you well, if I don't trust you, I find it easier to speak standard Jamaican English. My speech is more evenly paced. I find people, especially men, are more receptive to my boundaries that way. Now, I can speak both fluently. It's not that I've abandoned Patwa. It's that I've learned to switch between languages based on space, context, and audience, like most educated Jamaicans do. So, when I speak standard English, it's not a betrayal, it's a choice, a strategy, a skill, and it's one I'm proud of. Ever notice how some Jamaicans say apple instead of apple or ope instead of pope? This isn't ignorance, it's linguistic legacy. Jamaican Patois speakers often struggle with the H phoneme, a leftover from West African languages that didn't use that sound. And context, crucial. Take the word hush. In America, it means be quiet, possibly rude, but in Jamaica, it's full of empathy. Hush, my friend. A balm, basically a hug in one word. Language shapes perception. It's how we define our world, and Patwa doesn't just describe Jamaica, it is Jamaica. So, is Patwa a dialect or a language? Me say it a the voice of the people. And voice carry power, memory, resistance. Join me in episode 2, where we explore the role of Patwa in the Jamaican arts, from folk tales and dub poetry to dancehall clashes. Until then, walk good, my friend. This has been many notable things. As always, Thanks for listening.